Today we're building a mansion for the alchemist in our little enshrouded village. Let's get started on that. So the house of the alchemist is an unfortunate shape because I can't say this nicely, so I'm just going to do this straightforward. He lives in a I mean, there's the balls, there's the shaft, there's the knob. Plan was to have two spires because I didn't want it to be just a complete rectangle. I'm going to put a reference image somewhere on the screen, even though editing Poison just sometimes doesn't have a brain and forgets to put it in. But yeah, basically just reading hall, maybe two reading nooks. I want like one of the spires on the first floor to become like his bedroom. And then have like some kind of hallway, not hallways, but like an elevated walkway so that the reading area or reading room is going to be kind of open so that you can like be here. You see the like walkway up there with like even more books. And then the alchemist is going to be fancy and have an actual kitchen in what looks like a knob. Yeah, I can't get around that. But so, kitchen, for some reason I wanted to make it kind of round shaped, which is really unfortunate with how everything else turned out. This was not planned at all. Only later did I realize, oh. And then just some reading nooks for in the spires. Which again was just because I wanted to be fancy and not have it be rectangular. And now it has bit me in the ass, which when it comes to how this building is shaped is even more unfortunate because anything I say with this building, it's just wrong. So why did I build a mansion for the alchemist? Well, because I like to build pretty things, and so I decided, oh yeah, I want to build a mansion. I mean, it kind of makes sense because the next building, well, at least the building next to it is going to be my mansion, so it makes sense. Like, oh yeah, you have a couple of mansions there. So that's one of the reasons that I could say. The other reason is like, oh yeah, I could say like the alchemist or Balthazar is a pretty important person lore-wise when it comes to Enshrouded. But really the real reason is just I wanted to build a mansion. I did lie and say like, oh, it could be a library and Balthazar or the alchemist is just a stowaway who just lives there. Yeah, that would have been... I mean, it could be a convincing lie, but really I just wanted to build pretty things, and sometimes that's all the reason you need. Now, when it comes to the mansion, yeah, the shape is unfortunate, but I did not think about that when I started building, and only saw it when I built the staircase and then realized, oh. But anyways, when it comes to building the actual mansion, I wanted just to have something that kind of is really set apart from like the houses of the blacksmith, the carpenter, and the farmer. Which, I mean, it also stands apart because probably the houses of the carpenter and the farmer can fit inside of the mansion of the alchemist. But I wanted to just have something kind of imposing on the other side of the square. And I also later on decided to add a statue on that side, so it's really just like bam in your face. But when it comes to actually building the manor or the mansion, I did go full just balls to the walls when it comes to the 3-block wall technique, which isn't really a technique, but it's just making your walls 3 blocks thick so that then you have your outer wall, which usually is like, when it comes to second stories for me, usually, or like first floors and such, it's usually like the timber frame, but on the ground floor or in other types of buildings, it's like the stone. And then you have your middle wall, which is kind of like your backsplash. Like you have this in older houses where you have like the wood paneling and then the, what is it called? The wallpaper behind it. So that's like the middle block. And then you can have your wooden paneling. When it comes to my houses, I always want to build those out of the palm wood because it has just a really nice color. Like it's a really warm red brownish color, which especially realizing that like, oh yeah, this village is built right next to the shroud. Like it's on a mountain right next to this gigantic expanse of the shroud really just adds this really great contrast between like the death and decay of the shroud, and then you come into this village and it's just lively, like you go inside and it just feels warm and cozy. So I really like that. And when it comes to just like the interior of the mansion, I really just wanted something imposing, something that really made you feel like, yeah, there's the death and decay of the shroud, but here it's like you still have like grand mansions, you have people still kind of living it up in a way. I really like that. The funny thing though is like this house or this mansion should probably have more fireplaces than it has. It has one fireplace because the kitchen of course has a fireplace, and then upstairs has the fireplace connecting to the chimney of like, it's basically one chimney with two fireplaces on each level of the building. But yeah, you probably should have one in the bedroom as well. So funnily enough, this is a mansion. Should have probably the most fireplaces. Actually has the least amount in the village. Or at least realistically the least amount. Because you would want, like in a house like this, probably want a fireplace in your bedroom as well. Because there's no central heating or something. So the Alchemist is just kind of cold probably when he sleeps. But anyways, by this point, hey, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. I have actually recently seen that only, well, 70% of you guys are not subscribed. Balthazar or Gimli is very sad that you aren't subscribed. So hit that subscribe button. I can't say, and well, I can say a lot more, but my brain is just like, yeah, this is the reason why tours are usually a little bit more coherent, because there's voiceover poison, there's edit poison, and then there's recording poison. They're basically three separate beings. But anyways, let's actually get back into something else. So I had to stop myself from building as we've reached the first floor, and I wanted to make a few changes. First off, I don't want the bump out of the front door to actually continue on the second or the first floor. I want that to be kind of just a roof there. So it's not going to bump out like it does there. I'm actually pretty happy with the spires. I at first thought like, oh, they look a little bit weird. But it's probably going to look better once the spire is completed and there's a little bit more decoration. I did not put the windows in yet because I am going to do that last once the entire house is finished. So on the inside, I found out that if you use the fancy stone, if you make it 2 blocks, it will always create this sort of, how do you call this? This sort of foundation for pillars. So going to use that now everywhere, and it sort of blends nicely with just the palm wood and then also with the regular sandstone walls, which I like that they aren't completely clean, that there is like a little bit of like the texture of the actual rock still coming through. Makes it feel a little bit more aged. Anyways, so other thing is I made this first floor 2 blocks thick just because I like the visual of the fancy stone, and then have the palm wood overhang a little bit, gives it again a bit more dimension. This is where I needed to stop myself because I already continued building on the first floor with the walls, although it does help a little bit to make sure that like, oh yeah, these spires need to be a bit longer than this section, and the knob, or what's probably going to be like the alchemist's study, or like his, what do you call it, his laboratory, is also probably going to be higher. So it's going to be high spires, low shafts, and high knob. Yes, I just can't let go that it looks like a penis if you look at it from above. But then there's a thing that I do want to change, and that is maybe actually push this out a little bit more, so that like the wall from the palm wood actually comes over to here, so that it hangs over a little bit. It gives it a little bit more space overall here. Alright, I am back. Voice over poison. Which really is just like, voice over poison is probably the most chaotic. Recording poison is probably the more structured one, and then editing poison is just mentally exhausted all the time. But anyway, so back to trying to explain what is going on, which when it comes to the spires, this is where I think I made them, well, actually from the beginning the mistake was made, that the spires, like the rounded bits are not prominent enough, and then the flat bits, or like the four sides of it, are just too big, so that makes it look a lot flatter. So in a way it's still rounded, but it's rounded in such a way that it doesn't look rounded. But this was a great way to just like try and see like, oh, how am I going to do rounded things? I'm not going to change this build because it works fine as it is. But like for future builds, if I want to make something a little bit more rounded, I know to now keep like the flat areas smaller compared to the corners. But anyways, besides that, this build ended up being a lot higher than I thought. It's kind of funny because like all of the other buildings have more stories or like floors than the Alchemist, but the Alchemist is probably still like one of the highest, especially with like the spire, which is going to be a thing for later. But hey, I hope by this time you have subscribed, because yeah, these voiceovers are recorded back to back, but then the recording is just like a week ago. So I have no idea what I said in those recordings until I start editing. And I already said, editing poison is just mentally dead or mentally exhausted. Anyways, I also decided to, as I said, extend the back bit a bit, like bump it out just to create a little bit more of a unique shape on the first floor, which sounds really weird because it's the only like floor. Like all of the other buildings so far, the attics have become full-on floors, like the carpenter and, well, basically every other building, like not just the carpenter and the blacksmith, but also the farmer. Like their bedrooms are in what you could consider the attic. I just call it a full-on floor. And the Alchemist is the first one who doesn't have that. Like, this is the last floor that you can actually get to. I mean, you can jump around and basically make a jumping puzzle and try to get on top, but it's pretty much the only floor. Above this is just straight up the roof. There's no like hidden corners or anything, although that would be actually fun. I like to have like these stories with builds and such, so it would actually be fun to have like hidden corners. But then I think like the Alchemist is probably just, this sounds really egotistical, but he kind of is like me, where it's like, if I get something in my head, it's just like, yeah, that's it. Like, you can't convince me to do something else. Like, I'm as stubborn as an ox and a little bit too perfectionistic for my own good. So that's the thing with like, I built a statue. Again, this is recorded after the tour went up, and I was very critical about my own statue. That sounds really egotistical, but like the statue that I built, and someone said like, oh, you are way too critical, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm not critical enough. Like, that statue, luckily the backside has a cape, otherwise he was a plank. Like, it was totally flat in the back. So, I mean, is this me saying like, oh, I wanted to sculpt an ass on my statue? No, but also slightly yes. Anyways, back to recording poison. Alright, so it's starting to look like something livable. It also starts to look like something completely insane, which is the reason why I'm probably not going to add any dormers to the roof, because there's the spires. I added a little bit of like a bump out, or in, what do you call this? Pretty much I just wanted the entrance to be a little bit grander, so I just added this. I also bumped out the... It's not really going to be another floor. I'm just going to leave it open, but I just wanted to bump out that a little bit. But because of all that going on, the spires, like the entrance and everything, I'm not going to, well, probably not going to add any dormers, because you want to have like a little bit of rest. Like there's chaos in the middle, there's chaos to the sides. You want then a little bit of rest on the roof. So that if you add dormers to the roof, in this case at least, it would just be chaos, 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 chaos. Yeah, I want a little bit of insanity. I don't want to send people to a mental asylum. The spires are almost done. Almost, as in I need to add more walls so that the actual like wall bit of the spires comes up to the point of this roof. And then the spires will get their roof. And then I have this 3-part roof. So there's this part, which is probably going to face the same direction as the entrance. Then there's a middle part there, which is probably just going to be like a staircase roof. And then the lower part, which is just going to slot into it. I don't know how you really call it, where there's not like a flat side like there's here. I don't know how you call it. But anyways, we both know what's going to be the true nightmare. Those roofs. Also, just because of how it's now laid out, it doesn't look as much like a penis anymore. So I'm really happy with that. But anyways, you know, let's get going with what's probably going to be a nightmare. I like that the spires in the background. It's a little bit of sanity left. Anyways, let's get going. Alright, on to building the roof. Now, I'm not going to show everything when it comes to roof. I'm mainly focusing on the spires. And even then, it was such a trial to build these, because I've never really built something like this before. Like in Planet Zoo, building a spire or something is a lot, well, I'm going to say simpler, but that's because I just know the building tools in Planet Zoo. And then when you come to Enshrouded and you want to build something around, it's a very different method. Because it's pretty much, and maybe some people will disagree, but I mean, it's pretty much built like building in Minecraft, which is kind of funny because both Minecraft and Valheim never really took hold of me as much as Enshrouded has done. But it is kind of similar because you are building with blocks. So just actually looking at like build tutorials for Minecraft might actually be helpful for Enshrouded. You just have to like make the building blocks smaller. Because in Minecraft, like the block is like almost the size of your character, and in Enshrouded it's tiny compared to your character. Well, tiny is like 1/6 or so, or 1/8 of your character. So you just have to like finagle with it a bit in your brain. Again, like the spires, they're not the best, but it is a very, I would say, good first effort for making something more rounded in Enshrouded. Again, using the 3-block wall technique and trying to make these spires a little bit higher than the rest of the roof, because I am not going to blend that roof together. Like there's the main roof of like the main hall, and then you have the spires. Now the easiest way, and this is the thing that I've done, is to just make the spires taller so that you create separate roofs. Because blending those roofs together would be a nightmare. And also the spires are not actually, like the roofs of the spires are not actually tall enough. So the main roof would just overshadow it. So that's also like, oh yeah, the spires needed to be actually a story taller or a floor taller. Now I didn't put a floor in because I don't know how the Alchemist was going to get there besides a ladder. Initially, I also wanted to make it so that the spires actually connect, so that that middle wall between them disappears. But then I realized it actually looks better when they are still separated on the interior. But yeah, building the actual roof was, I mean, it was in a way easy, but also it just made me think about building just slightly differently. And eventually it all came together, but it was a lot of just like, all right, I'm just going to sit down. This is not going to be that exciting. It's just building layer on layer. Basically building a cake or a cupcake or a muffin. What's actually the difference between a cupcake and a muffin? I mean, they're both cake. Like, let me know in the comments, what's the difference between a cupcake and a muffin? Muffins, I think, are not usually like frosted, I think, but I always also consider muffins to be like less sweet potentially. Anyways, that's like completely off topic. But again, this is voiceover Poison. This is basically just like take recording Poison, give him no focus, and just let him go wild. This is why I actually like separating the tour videos from the speed build videos, just because it's like you basically get a completely different person. But anyways, when it came to the spires, I actually decided to put like a little bit of an extra bit, I don't know what you call this, on top of the spire in front towards the square, just because I thought like, oh yeah, just a little bit of pizzazz, and also the roofs are all the tarred roof blocks, and that creates this very brown color, which is nice, but when the entire roof is like that, it kind of becomes boring. So I decided, alright, let's add an extra little spirey bit on top from the palm wood, so that it has a different wood tone on it as well, just to make the roof a little bit more exciting. I did say like, oh yeah, I don't want to add dormers or something like that, because then the roof would be total chaos. But this area was just like so much brown and so much of like the same color brown that it actually kind of needed it. The rest of the house, just because of like the different levels and such, doesn't need that. But these spires were just like, alright, this is already a little bit extra, but now that little bit extra is just a sea of brown. Which sounds really bad. Like, it just sounds wrong to say a sea of brown. But anyways, when it comes to the actual spires itself, in a weird way, it was easy for me to build this, because as soon as like things start clicking together, that's when it's just like, oh yeah, this I need to do, and this is like the pattern that I need to follow. Is that how everybody's brain works, or is that just me? Whenever I see a pattern and I know like, oh, I need to just repeat that pattern, it just sticks in my brain. So when it came to the roofs, it was just like, oh, the moment I saw a pattern, I could replicate it. Anyways, back to recording Poison, because I have no idea what he's going to say, but well, actually I do know, because editing Poison is also here. Yeah, I added a little bit of an extra thing on the first of the spires, or the first of the towers. The only thing that I don't like is, looks pretty flat from over here, but from the front, looks pretty nice. But yeah, the roof's pretty simple, just yeah, the spires were the only thing that was really difficult. Just normal roofs everywhere. Then we had this bump out here, which I needed to make sure that it sort of blended in. Another roof. And another roof. But what we are still missing is, of course, windows. Don't look over there. I was just trying something out. Those are not windows. They are fake. They are holes. Let's build some windows and just decorate all of it. Alright, for the final stretch of the journey. Building all of the windows and such, and all the decorations on the outside. We're not doing the furniture, because I actually like to kind of keep that separate, so that between the speed build and the tour, there's still like some things that aren't shown, but then between the speed build and the tour, there's also the statue and the tailor's shop, so there's a lot of things that are just like, you know, to keep interest in both of those. But yeah, when it comes to the windows, with the 3-block build technique, it's really handy to only build the windows last. To keep in mind where the windows are going to be, but do not actually carve them out until last. Because when it comes to like the 3-block technique, of course you have to go through 3 blocks. So where the windows on the inside might look a little bit different on the outside. So you have to keep in mind where you're going to place the windows, but also need to be kind of flexible with like how the windows are going to look in the end. And then you sometimes have like weird little corners, like the window in the kitchen of the alchemist actually was like, I think it was like 7 blocks wide, which, because the window frames that you get in game are 2 blocks wide, made it so that one of the windows would kind of clip into each other, but not in like a pretty way. So then I just decided in the end of like, oh yeah, we're just going to like make it so that that window is open all of the time, which makes sense. It's the kitchen. It can get like kind of smoky in there because I like the storyline that the alchemist just can't cook for shit. Like, he can create all of these potions and such. Like, he can heal you at like in the blink of an eye. But if you ask him to make a cake, he will look at you and will just go completely pale and look like you are seeing a ghost, because he can't cook for shit. Also, yeah, I like when it comes to like, again, this is really just probably not the main focus of Enshrouded, because Enshrouded, it's about survival. But like, when it comes to like building kitchens or such, I would like, you know, pots and pans and such. I just basically want to turn Enshrouded into my cozy little village builder. Give me my pans, give me my pots, give me my food items and such, because there's a lot of food items and I want to display them on plates. And give me potted flowers and just all of the trees, because there's also the red trees that I just want. Anyways, now back to the outside, which is where I tried to rectify my mistake when it comes to the spires looking really flat. And that is by just bumping out the flat areas a bit with pillars and such to kind of make it look more rounded. Because it's pretty much just like adding that little bit more shape to it that the spire would otherwise not have. Now, when it comes to, you know, the decorations and such, you know, the front of the house is fine. The left side of it is also fine. But the right side of it, the back side of it, that's all just off the cliff. So, yeah, I fell a lot. I am not very well coordinated in this game, so I just kept falling. I only died twice, I think, while building this house, which I take as an achievement. But yeah, I pretty much just was like, oh yeah, I want to bump these things out. I want like add some kind of, how do you call it, framing to all of the decorations and such, which also kind of makes it so that from the outside you can see where like the floors are, which for these like historical buildings or these sort of like medieval fantasy buildings kind of makes sense, because like the beams of a floor would kind of stick out. So then you can make that like nice with like some of these like outlinings and such. And also just a thing in general, roofs should always stick out. Unless you're building like those Dutch gable roofs that I built for like the starter village, where the roof will just be like completely flat to the walls. But when it comes to like buildings like this, or actually most buildings in the village, because I haven't gone for like those Dutch gable house or roofs. Here you see me fall, but I thought I cut all of those out, but then I'm just like, I look over to the actual visuals and it's just like, oh, I'm falling off a cliff. I did say I wasn't well coordinated. But anyways, so when it comes to the roofs, as I said, always make them stick out. It just adds, this is just my stop word at this point, it just adds a nice dimension. Like having the roof overhang 1 or 2 blocks, and you can like decorate the underside, where if it's like extending 2 blocks, you have that like, you know, the underside of the roof, the block that's not fully off the wall, but it's like the middle block between like where the roof is on the wall and where it's fully just floating. Then you can add like nice decoration with like blocks and such. Like, one of the things that I would recommend the most is just try and experiment with as many blocks as possible. See how like the blocks interact with each other, because that's how I found out like, oh yeah, using like the fancy stone blocks for the foundation of pillars makes it look really nice. And having the fancy stone for like the outlinings of like the different floors on the outside works really well. And it also just adds like nice color differentiation or like color contrast, because if you're just using the timber frame or like the half timber blocks, and here it's like the roughly cut stone, and you're only using those blocks, you can sometimes create a very monotone building, because both of those blocks are a little bit more cold colored, I think is what you got it, but like having like other blocks that are like slightly different, like the fancy stone is slightly warmer toned, makes it so that the building is a little bit more interesting, because there is contrast, even though the contrast is not that extreme that it's like blowing your brains out. So that's like a little tip from Poison. Use a lot of different blocks while building. And also, probably pack like a, what's it called? Parachute. Voice over Poison really doesn't have a brain. We're really just three entities at this point. But anyways, so decorating the outside of like the bump outs was hell on earth. For some reason, I was just like, oh yeah, I need a lot of like the scaffolding to like try and get over there. And then I forgot like, oh yeah, gravity isn't really a thing when it comes to building. So I could just like make a walkway out of the blocks. I don't know why it took me this long to actually do that. But anyway, so like decorating that again, like having like those outlinings and just a little bit more of a framework to add. Again, stop word of the day, dimension. But I really just wanted this to kind of look just insane. Like the spires have their like own style, and then like everything has a bit of its own style, so that it looks really like, oh, the alchemist just built this and then added this onto it and this onto it, so that there is a little bit of like an organic vibe to the entire building. Even though it's all just like blocks and such, by making it so that like, oh yeah, here there's like a window that's just completely sealed off, but there was at one point a window there. And then there's like this bump out that's just like sort of like a slightly different style. Because you have that with, I mean, historical buildings where, yeah, they have been added onto. Now, when it comes to adding all of the vines, I figured out that just on one side of the building, they just don't show up. And it's also just like complete guesswork on where they show up. So it's just a lot of just like placing single blocks of dirt, seeing like, oh, they show up here, the blocks can stay. If they don't show up there, then you need to remove those blocks, because then it's just pretty much pointless. So it would be fun to have like a vine block as well. This is just Poison asking for every building item, because I just want to build cozy villagers or villages. Oh yeah, there's a survival aspect of this game. Yeah, but look at my nice little strawberry patch and farm. That's more important. I still want the pots and pans and the red trees as well. Like, I have this whole list of like the building items that I'm wanting, and I'm like, Poison, remember, the game has been out for, I think, even less than a month. You're already demanding a lot of shit. Anyway, if you want to see all of the furniture and decoration, like pretty much the entire interior, head over to that tour video that I uploaded earlier. And with that, let's close out this video. Alright, so I'm going to leave you with some shots of the interior. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more, there's the subscribe button. There's also the memberships if you want emotes. And that's pretty much it. Anyways, have a wonderful day, guys. Bye-bye.